Welcome to another edition of Dolphins In Depth podcast about the Miami Dolphins, sponsored by the Miami Herald. On this edition, we're going to talk about a couple of things that happened this week. Some of them should be celebrated, like the addition of Calais Campbell and Marcus Maye, a safety from 7-year veteran who's played for the Jets and recently played for the New Orleans Saints. But then other things that have happened sort of lead to it, make us question where the Dolphins are in their contract negotiations with Tua Tagovailoa. Obviously, the deal hasn't gotten done yet. Otherwise, we would have seen some smoke signals coming from Miami Gardens facility. The Dolphins have been in a long-standing negotiation with Tua Tagovailoa and his camp to try to get a multi-year deal done that pays him compensatory to where he stands in the NFL hierarchy of quarterbacks. I would argue to you that Tua is arguably the 13th best quarterback in the NFL, maybe because of his age, wants to get paid like a top 10 quarterback, and he certainly wants to be compensated like his peers. There are about 7 quarterbacks who are now in the $50 million a year club, or allegedly $50 million a year club, and Tua wants to get in there on a new deal. Now, one of the new quarterbacks entering the $50 million club is Jacksonville Jaguars quarterback Trevor Lawrence. Now, last night, Trevor Lawrence, who is entering the final year of his rookie deal. He's not even on his 5th-year option like Tua Tagovailoa is. But he got a multi-year deal done with the Jacksonville Jaguars that will be a 5-year extension that allegedly pays him $275 million, which includes $200 million in guaranteed money, $142 million of it at the signing. Now, obviously, this is what is being reported, and I take what is being reported with a cautious approach, because usually, especially when it's an agent just telling their mouthpieces of the NFL what the deals are, when you finally read the fine print, what you learn is that it's really a 7-year deal for Trevor Lawrence, which includes his rookie salary this year, which includes his 5th-year option, and then includes the 5 years for $275 million. You have to know the details of the deal. The details are where it's all at in order to be able to evaluate the contract. And we don't have those details at the present moment. But what we do know is that Trevor Lawrence allegedly walked away with $142 million at signing, which is understandable and reasonable. That's compensatory to what his peers are making, and $200 million in guarantees, which are including an injury guarantee. It's easy to guarantee injury in probably the 2027 season, or I'm just giving you an exaggeration. It sort of fits in the line of the Justin Herbert deal. When you look at Justin Herbert's deal, he got a 7-year deal for $300 million, 133.7 fully guaranteed, 193.7 guaranteed for injury. Yada, 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 if you know the Seinfeld reference. While I don't want to get fixated on the numbers, here's what the nuts and bolts of the situation is. I've always said this offseason that the sooner Miami gets the deal done with Tua, the better off they will be as an organization, because every quarterback that signs raises the price. If you know, all of these quarterback agents, and usually all of the agents, they work in unison together. And they're a team to ensure that the position continues to go up and somebody doesn't sign a deal that deflates the market. Now, markets have been deflated at different positions before. However, quarterback just so happens to be a market that probably will never get deflated, because there's arguably 15 quarterbacks that are good for 32 teams. Teams are jockeying for those quarterbacks. And look at Kirk Cousins' situation as a perfect example. Kirk Cousins got a $45 million a year salary, $100 million in guaranteed money, coming off an Achilles injury where he didn't play an entire season, and he's advanced 30s. He's in his 30s. Now, that's what a quarterback who hits the open market gets. We could potentially be testing that as well, not only with Tua Tagovailoa, but also with Dak Prescott. The last thing that the NFL wants to do is to let a quarterback hit the open market. But then it seems like what the Dolphins don't want to do is pay market price for their quarterback, who they claim that they love. And here's Tua in his own words talking about where the quarterback landscape from contract standpoints seems to be.
Did you think there'd be more progress at this point?
Well, I think there's been a lot of progress at this point. From where we started, there's been a lot of progress. Now, you can ask the other question, then why aren't we seeing, an agreement? Well, that's the tough part about it. That's why it's business. That's why you got one side and the other trying to work to meet in the middle.
Are you confident that you'll get a deal?
The contract negotiation have to do with your attendance during the first part of off-season program?
I don't know. I don't control any of that. I control if I come or not, but I don't control, how they think about that.
Do you view those numbers that others get around the league as benchmarks for your negotiations, like Jared Goff getting 53 per year?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. The market is the market. If we didn't have a market, then none of that would matter. It'd just be an organizational thing, Didn't matter if that guy got paid that, because it's up to the organization. So that's what I would say. The market is the market. That's it.
Are you confident that a deal will get done before training camp?
I'm confident that a deal would get done. But then again, it's not in my control. It's really up to both sides meeting in the middle with this.
You're a passionate and emotional guy. Is it difficult for you to separate the two things out there? Yeah,
100%. 100%. For people that talk about business is different than personal, sure, like I can agree to some extent, but who you are as a person, for what you do, business and personal, is who you are with how you do everything. That's how I see it. That's just how I look at it. And if not, like, if you can be two different people at once, like, hey, by all means, you can do that. But to me, that's just not how I am.
I've always found that finishing quote from Tua, who did not have to talk to the media, but clearly wanted to set the agenda for this contract negotiations, which is going to probably take another 6 weeks, if not up until the beginning of the exhibition season, if not up until the beginning of the regular season. But that final quote hints to me that there's some frustration between himself and the organization. Tua is a stand-up guy, stand-up individual. If you have a problem with Tua, more than likely the problem is you. Now, here's the issue, and it's a topic that I'm writing about in a Miami Herald column. If you say you love somebody, you want to propose, you want to marry them, where's the ring? And that's where the Dolphins organization is. They say they love Tua, they say they want to marry him, but they have not been willing or able to purchase the ring and then present it to him on one knee. So that's where we are. We're in a standoff. Obviously, the franchise has options, and I do believe that the Dolphins have the leverage in this situation, because they can technically make Tua play on the fifth-year option, just like they made Christian Wilkins play on the fifth-year option, and then they can tag him for not just one, but the next 2 years. But when you do that, you're making ultimately a financial commitment of $117 million in terms of the fifth-year option for $23 million, franchise tag year one for $43 million, franchise tag year two for more than, which is going to be a 20% increase, for $51.6 million. When you do that, you are cap strapping yourself and not making it very easy to improve the roster or extend players or to add talents to make your team better. So that's not exactly an ideal route to go. However, if the Dolphins organization said we need Tua to prove himself some more, it is a route that they can make. However, what you learn with Christian Wilkins is there are consequences to that. So it'll be interesting to see how this storyline plays out. I think we're probably going to be sitting on this on a weekly basis, if not for the next 6 weeks. Maybe this is a situation that doesn't come to a head until the regular season. It seems like Tua is dug in on getting a contract that is compensatory with what his peers are making. And if his peers, which are Joe Burrow, Jared Goff, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, now Trevor Lawrence, are all in the $50 million a year club, Tua is making the argument, why shouldn't he be? And it'll be interesting to see where the organization is and where the franchise is in terms of what they're willing to offer. To me, I would hope that a contract of $150 million is on the table for Tua. And when I say that, I'm talking about guaranteed money, which is the only real money that matters. Now, if it's not, there would be a problem, and which is probably why you haven't seen a deal get done. If I'm Tua, I'm probably not signing anything that doesn't guarantee me $170 million. So that $20 million gap is where I believe that the impasse is. And it'll be interesting to see if both sides meet in the middle or if they don't. Let's move on to some of the new additions that the Miami Dolphins have added. And for those who have followed my work when I did All Dolphins, or even now with Dolphins In Depth, you know I've been a big advocate for the Miami Dolphins to sign Calais Campbell, and they actually did. This week, the Miami Dolphins had their meetings where they evaluated the training camp roster, saw where they are from a talent standpoint, and said, okay, these are problem areas, and we need to explore whether or not we can address them now or have to wait for teams to pare down their 53-man roster and then find what we can find from the waiver wire or the rummage rack. Wisely, and I do truly do mean wisely, the Dolphins looked at the depth that they had at the defensive line and the depth that they had at safety and said, this is not enough. Now, safety happened to be one of the more talented units in terms of free agents. There's a ton of talented safeties out there. And the Miami Dolphins actually did something very smart where they added Marcus Maye, a 7-year veteran who started 77 games. He started every single NFL game he's played. They added him to the secondary. I think that that's going to be a huge benefit. While he's battling a shoulder injury and he's got injury history throughout the course of his career, this is a player who was not only the 2022 MVP of the New York Jets, bad New York Jets team, but he was the MVP voted on by his peers. He was also a player that the Jets franchise tagged to retain his rights for one season. He signed a mega deal for the safety position with the New Orleans Saints. So this is a player who is not a leftover. The only reason he probably hasn't had a contract is because he was rehabbing a shoulder injury. Veterans do not sign generally until they can pass a physical. I don't know what the deals of the terms of the contract are, but what I do know is that it can definitely help this Dolphins team create better coverage in the secondary. When you look at what the Baltimore Ravens did last season, they used 3 safeties for about 38% of their defensive snaps last season. Now, a lot of that is dime, a lot of that is nickel. When you have Kyle Hamilton, who's the size of a linebacker and has the coverage skills of a cornerback, it allows you to do a whole lot of things, especially putting them in the box and having to cover slot receivers and having to cover tight ends. That was a luxury that they had. However, with Javon Holland, he's got the position flexibility to play nickel. He's got the position flexibility to play in the box. So does Jordan Poyer, who has got the position flexibility to play in the box. By adding a Marcus Maye, who's played both free safety and strong safety, you added a lot of versatility to your secondary. Now that frees up Nick Needham to stick at the nickel spot or even work as an outside boundary, adding depth there, or even, have him play the safety dime role, which he played last season. So it just adds another piece that helps you from a secondary standpoint. And I think it allows you to be a little bit more versatile. Now, the question is, can he be healthy for the regular season? I wouldn't be shocked if he's in that 30-year-old club where they do not play in the exhibition season. They sparingly participate in the joint practices, and they're rested and primed for the regular season. That seems to be the approach that Mike McDaniel is going to take with a lot of his 30-year-olds, and I don't necessarily discourage that approach, considering the Dolphins' issues are performances in December and January, and that means they need some healthy bodies. The other addition happens to be one of the oldest players in the NFL, former University of Miami standout Calais Campbell, who I have advocated for quite a while that the Miami Dolphins should sign. I believe in August he's going to be 38 years old. But if you look at the productivity that Calais Campbell had with the Atlanta Falcons last season, it was dominant, absolutely impressive. And when you look at the talent that they had on the defensive line, which was a little suspect, from Deshaun Hand to Benito Jones to Jonathan Harris to Neville Gallimore. These are Otier Tart. These are all players who are basically minimum salary players. I did a column for the Miami Herald, and I pointed out that Raekwon Davis, who signed a 2-year deal for $14 million with the Indianapolis Colts, will make $850,000 less this year than the 5 veteran players that the Miami Dolphins signed collectively. So Miami Dolphins backup from last year is going to make $7 million, while the 5 players that you signed before Calais Campbell was going to make $7.85 million collectively. That just gives you a grasp and understanding of where this team was from a talent standpoint, because another team looked at your backup and said, he's pretty good. And then you signed everybody else's backup for the veteran minimum and thought it was going to fly. Well, truth be told, it didn't. They knew it. And they wisely went out and signed Calais Campbell, who's a player that has history with Anthony Weaver from his time in the Baltimore Ravens. Anthony Weaver coached Calais Campbell and knows how well he is in terms of 1, scheme versatility, 2, toughness, and 3, leadership. Here is Anthony Weaver talking about what he's looking for, not only just from his inside linebackers, but from his defensive line, which he's going to use a heavy rotation for.
First off, I love that room, right? You talk about a room that brings juice and attacks the day every single day. It's them, right? And it's led by Joe Barry, who does a tremendous job with them. In this league, with the way offenses are trying to attack you both vertically and horizontally and trying to space out the entire field, you better have linebackers who can do that. It's not like back in the day when I was playing, right? And you're getting a lot of lead and ISO, and you better have a guy that's going to thumper and throw it up in there. The league has kind of transitioned away from that. So you still need physicality there, but at that position, you better have athletes. And fortunately, I think we have a bunch in there.
With their defensive line, obviously there are a number of different guys, a number of different body types. How versatile do they have to be? And I know you're going to do multiple fronts, but do you have to have varying skill sets in that group?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you need to have the right balance of guys who I like to call grinders, right? Guys who are going to go there and change the math in the middle, whether that's with mass or just elite technique. And then you need your guys that are kind of in between, that are tweeners, guys that can both do that, yet are athletic enough and have the skill set to both win and pass rush, whether that's to be with power or with finesse. So you're always looking for the right balance and combination of that, and making sure that you have enough of each. I think we have that. I think we have that. I think a lot of the guys may not necessarily be household names, but I think they're all guys that have had a taste of production in this league, and their best years are probably yet to come.
You have typically, and you've coached the defensive lines, you've used a heavy rotation. That's what you're known for. Is that just your approach, that you believe that you're best in waves?
Yeah, it's kind of like the tsunami approach, right? I'm half Samoan. I lived in Hawaii for a little while, and they always say, like, the first wave of the tsunami does damage, but the second wave does the most damage. So for me, like, sometimes people get overly concerned about who's starting the football games. That means nothing to me. I want to know who's finishing the football games. And I think you have your best chance at finishing football games when guys are fresh. All right, you can't do that at every position, but particularly when there's bigs out there running around in this heat, you're going to want to rotate them a little bit.
So the Miami Dolphins are going to be utilizing a 3-4 base, which we've seen generally probably for most of the past decade. I believe Brian Flores used a 3-4 base. Emmanuel Ogbah was one of the 3-4 edges. This was a traditional 3-4 base, but really they used a nickel package as their base with Sealer and Christian Wilkins as the interior defensive linemen, and then Chubbs and Phillips as the edge. What Miami's going to do is use a 3-4 base with probably Sealer and Calais Campbell as the 3-4 edges, Tart and Benito Jones, Tia Tart and Benito Jones as the nose tackles. They primarily play just specifically on running downs. And then when it's passing downs, they're going to Sealer and Campbell will probably go inside. You've obviously got Hand and Harrison and Gallimore as the rotational guys. And then you have the 2 edges, whether it be Chubb and Phillips when they get healthy, or Chop and Shaq Barrett, or Mo Kamara. So that's really going to be the foundation of what the Dolphins do from a defensive standpoint. And before they made this signing of Calais Campbell, who's third in the NFL in active sacks, behind two players, Cameron Jordan and Buffalo Bills, Von Miller. Those are the only two who have more than Calais Campbell, who's got, I believe, 105 sacks. This was a big issue that the Miami Dolphins felt like they had to address. Now, interestingly, on the final day of the minicamp, we talked to Miami Dolphins coach Mike McDaniel about where he felt his team was in the trenches, both offensively and defensively. And here's what Mike had to say.
Said before, Chris Greer's always working Coleman. I am very happy with our current orchestration of both those units. The offensive line, there's a little more history and experience. Personally, with all the guys involved, it's on the defensive line, there's more new. So the guys are working to get things tied together with the entire defense in that regard. Just like the newer offensive linemen that we do have are working to master a new scheme. I'm very happy with the team. Open to competition. I think competition always breeds benefit for the Miami Dolphins, just because it brings the best out of people. So we'll never shut the door on that. But I'm happy with the groups, their production, how they've been working together, and happy with both depths.
Yeah, definitely the addition of Calais Campbell improves that happiness level. Calais is a beast, and not only is he a beast, but he's also a locker room leader. He's going to bring a Teron Armstead, Raheem Morris type presence to the team. If you haven't paid attention or don't know much about Calais, I encourage you to check out the NFL's top 100 rankings and see the profiles that they've done on Calais. He's been mic'd up a number of times. He brings a lot of energy, brings a lot of leadership. And I felt like this Dolphins team needed that leadership presence on the defensive side of the ball. While there are some very good players on the defensive side of the ball, I wouldn't necessarily label a lot of them as leaders. And really, Zach Sealer, I think he can learn a lot from Calais Campbell in terms of the leadership that he's going to bring. And I would not be surprised if that entire unit, that entire defense follows Calais's lead. And he might be voted a captain by the time we close out training camp. That's the type of player that Calais has been, and he's had a Hall of Fame worthy career, and I'm glad he's going to have the opportunity to finish it here in Miami. On that note, we also want to address the offensive line. While that happens to be one of the areas where I would argue to you the Dolphins could certainly use some reinforcements, most teams in the NFL, and I have combed through what is available, and there is not much available. Phil Hayes, probably the only option that I would explore signing, and I don't necessarily know what I would offer him. Most teams are going into training camp with 15 offensive linemen strong. Teams are going to pare down their offensive lines, and you're going to be able to pick from the waiver wire or pick veterans that get released. The Dolphins really need a backup center if they're going to have Liam Eichenberg solidify himself as a starting right guard. To me, that right guard spot is going to come down to Rob Jones, Liam Eichenberg, and Jack Driscoll. Who wins it? Who knows? But if Eichenberg isn't allowed to legitimately compete because he's got to play center, that's going to be putting him at a disadvantage. So to me, one of the major additions that the Miami Dolphins should consider is adding a backup center. Problem is there is no quality backup center out there. There wasn't last year when the Miami Dolphins traded one of their offensive linemen to the Chicago Bears because they needed a backup center. So right now, this is the time where you probably make the best of what you have. You figure out what you take to training camp. You hope that there are no injuries, and then you continue to move forward. The Dolphins, from a talent standpoint, they're pretty deep at offensive tackle. It's just a matter of the interior. Is it solidified? And between Isaiah Wynn, Liam Eichenberg, Lester Cotton, Rob Jones, Chosen Hines, Jack Driscoll. That's 6 players competing for 2 starting spots and 2 backup roles. Hopefully they can figure it out and manage to figure out how to sort of fill that void. So it'll be interesting to see, one, whether or not the Dolphins continue to add in this 6-week hiatus that they have between now and the start of training camp, and also if they continue to make forward progress on a contract extension for Tua Tagovailoa, who is obviously looking for a 5 to 7 year deal that pays him somewhere north of $45 million a season. So we'll continue to follow that on Dolphins In Depth. Always appreciate you guys' continued support, and we will be back next week with another episode.